The Colorado mountain winds carried no mercy for the lost. Dr. Marcus Chen knew this truth as he drove frantically through the swirling snow, his medical bag bouncing on the passenger seat of his pickup truck. The late evening blizzard had descended, without warning, turning familiar mountain roads into treacherous paths where visibility dropped to mere feet ahead of his headlights. Rebecca. Marcus's voice was swallowed by the howling wind outside his vehicle, disappearing into the white void that surrounded him. Rebecca, where are you? Logic told him it was impossible. His wife couldn't possibly be out in this storm. Dr. Rebecca Hayes had been gone for 3 years now, claimed by the avalanche that had swept through their medical mission camp in the remote valleys of Afghanistan. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. But the nightmare had felt so real. Her voice calling to him, from somewhere in the darkness, begging him to find the medical supplies she had hidden before the disaster struck. The supplies meant for the children's clinic they had planned to build together here in Pine Valley. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tighter, forcing himself to focus on the present. The storm was worsening, and if he didn't find shelter soon, he might join the countless souls who had perished in the merciless embrace of these Colorado peaks. As he turned his truck toward the clinic, something caught his eye through the swirling snow. A flash of bright red against the endless white of the landscape. Marcus stopped the vehicle, his heart pounding. He stepped out into the biting cold, squinting against the stinging snowflakes. There, barely visible near the clinic's back entrance, lay a small figure crumpled against the building's stone foundation. Marcus ran through the snow, his medical training overriding everything else. As he approached, he could see it was a child, a girl no more than 12 years old, wearing a thin red jacket that provided little protection against the mountain cold. Her dark hair was matted with snow and ice, her small body trembling uncontrollably from hypothermia. "Hey there," Marcus called softly, kneeling beside her and immediately checking for vital signs. Her pulse was weak but present, her breathing shallow and labored. Severe hypothermia, possible frostbite, and from the bruises visible on her face, recent trauma. "Can you hear me? I'm Dr. Chen. You're going to be okay." The girl's eyes fluttered, open, revealing deep brown irises filled with fear and pain. She tried to speak, but her lips were too cold, her body too exhausted. In her clenched fist, she held something small and metallic, a pendant of some kind that she refused to release even in her semi-conscious state. Without hesitation, Marcus gathered the girl in his arms, surprised by how light she felt. Malnutrition, his medical mind noted automatically. He carried her quickly through the snow to the clinic's entrance, fumbling with his keys while supporting her weight. The building had been his sanctuary and his prison for the past 3 years, the place where he went through the motions of practicing medicine while his heart remained frozen in grief. Inside the warmth of the clinic, Marcus laid the girl on one of the examination tables and immediately began emergency treatment. He stripped away her wet clothes, noting more bruises and what appeared to be rope burns on her wrists, signs of captivity and abuse that made his stomach turn with familiar rage. He had seen such injuries before, during his time treating trafficking victims in the military. As he worked to stabilize her temperature and treat her injuries, Marcus found himself speaking to the unconscious girl, words of comfort and reassurance that felt strange after years of silence. "You're safe now. Whatever happened to you, whatever brought you here, you're safe at the Riverside Clinic. I'm going to take care of you." The girl remained unconscious as Marcus worked through the night, monitoring her vital signs and ensuring her body temperature gradually returned to normal. It wasn't until the first light of dawn filtered through the clinic windows that she finally stirred, her eyes opening to focus on Marcus's concerned face hovering above her. Fear immediately filled her expression, and she tried to scramble away from him, her small body still weak from hypothermia and exhaustion. Marcus held up his hands, showing he meant no harm, keeping his voice low and gentle. "Easy there. You're in a medical clinic. I'm Dr. Marcus Chen, and I found you outside in the snow last night. You were nearly frozen to death." He gestured around the familiar examination room with its medical equipment and certificates on the walls. "You're safe here. No one is going to hurt you." The girl pressed herself against the back of the examination table, her breathing rapid. and panicked. Her gaze darted around the room, clearly looking for escape routes, before settling back on Marcus with deep suspicion. "Please," she whispered, her voice hoarse and barely audible. "Please don't send me back to him. I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The terror in her eyes, the automatic assumption that she would be punished, spoke of systematic abuse and control. He had encountered such cases during his military service, children caught in trafficking networks who had been conditioned to expect pain from every adult encounter. "No one is sending you anywhere," Marcus said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life and death decisions. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl hesitated, clearly weighing whether it was safe to answer. Finally, she whispered, "Emma. Emma Rodriguez." "How old are you, Emma?" 12, sir." The sir was added hastily, as if forgetting it might result in punishment. Marcus nodded, keeping his expression neutral despite the anger building inside him at whoever had instilled such fear in a child. "Well, Emma, you've been through quite an ordeal. When did you last eat something?" Emma's gaze dropped to the pendant still clutched in her hand. "I don't remember. Maybe 2 days ago. There were some berries I found along the trail, but they made me sick." Marcus felt his heart clench at the casual way she described her deprivation. "Let's fix that right away." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Think you could handle some warm broth to start? Your stomach needs time to adjust to food again." Emma nodded eagerly, though she still watched Marcus with wary eyes as he moved around the clinic. The building served as both his medical practice and his home, an arrangement that had seemed practical after Rebecca's death, but now felt isolated and hollow. The kitchen area adjacent to his living quarters had seen little use in recent years, but he managed to find ingredients for a simple vegetable broth. While the soup heated on the stove, Marcus returned to Emma with a set of clean clothes he had found in the clinic's donation box. They would be too large for her small frame, but they were warm and dry. "These should be more comfortable than those wet things," he said, handing her the bundle. "There's a bathroom right through that door where you can change and clean up, if you'd like." Emma took the clothes hesitantly, as if expecting them to be snatched away at any moment. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. I don't have any money to pay you, though." The practical concern from someone so young struck Marcus deeply. "You don't need money, Emma. This is what doctors do. We help people who are hurt or sick." As Emma disappeared into the bathroom to change, Marcus found himself pacing the clinic's main room, his mind working to process what had happened. For 3 years, he had moved through his days in a mechanical routine, treating the occasional patient who wandered into his small-town practice, but feeling disconnected from the purpose that had once driven him. He and Rebecca had planned to establish this clinic as a haven for those who couldn't afford traditional medical care, particularly trafficking victims and undocumented immigrants who feared seeking help. After Rebecca's death, Marcus had maintained the clinic but abandoned their shared vision. He treated patients efficiently and professionally, but the passion for their mission had died with her in that Afghan avalanche. Now, holding this frightened girl who had literally appeared on his doorstep during a blizzard, he felt something stirring in his chest that had been dormant for far too long. Emma emerged from the bathroom wearing the oversized clothes, her dark hair now clean and braided back from her face. The warm shower had brought color back to her cheeks, but also made the bruises on her arms more visible. Marcus noted several that appeared to be in various stages of healing, suggesting ongoing abuse rather than a single incident. "The soup smells good," Emma said shyly, hovering near the bathroom door as if unsure whether she was allowed to approach. "The kitchen area. Come sit down," Marcus invited, pulling out a chair at the small table where he usually ate his solitary meals. "Let's get some food in you, and then we can talk about what brought you here." Emma approached cautiously, settling into the chair and accepting the bowl of broth with reverent care. She ate slowly, savoring each spoonful as if it might be her last meal. Marcus watched her, noting the practiced way she made the food last. Another sign of someone who had experienced real hunger. "This is really good," Emma said between careful sips. "My mama used to make soup like this when I was little. She was a nurse, and she said good food was the best medicine for almost anything." Marcus felt his chest tighten at the past tense reference to her mother. "What happened to your mama, Emma?" Emma's spoon paused halfway to her mouth, her expression growing distant and pained. She got sick trying to protect me from my stepfather. He hurt her really bad, and she never got better after that. The doctors said there wasn't anything more they could do. The simple words carried a weight of tragedy that reminded Marcus of his own loss. I'm sorry, Emma. Losing someone you love is one of the hardest things in the world. Emma nodded solemnly, then reached into her pocket and withdrew the pendant Marcus had noticed earlier. It was a small silver cross with a red cross symbol, the kind worn by medical personnel. This was hers. She gave it to me before she died and told me to find someone who would understand what it meant. Marcus leaned forward to examine the pendant more closely. It was indeed a medical insignia, specifically one used by emergency room nurses, the kind Rebecca had worn during her own medical training. The coincidence sent a chill down his spine. Your mother was right to give you that, Marcus said softly. It means she dedicated her life to helping people, to healing. That's a powerful legacy to carry. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back with the determined control of someone who had learned that crying often brought punishment. After she died, my stepfather said I had to earn my keep. He sold me to some men who said they would give me work, but they lied. They were taking me somewhere else, somewhere far away where no one would ever find me. Marcus felt a cold rage building in his chest, the same fury he had experienced when treating child victims during his military deployments. How did you get away, Emma? I ran, Emma said simply. When we stopped for gas yesterday, I pretended to be sick so they would let me out of the van. Then I just ran into the woods and kept running until I couldn't anymore. I followed the highway signs until I saw the clinic sign, and I thought maybe someone there would help me like my mama used to help people. The courage it had taken for a 12-year-old girl to escape from her captors and survive alone in the Colorado wilderness was staggering. Marcus found himself looking at Emma with newfound respect, seeing past her small size and obvious vulnerability to the steel core of determination that had kept her alive. You were very brave, Emma, he said seriously, and very smart to keep running until you found help. But the men who took you, do you think they might come looking for you? Fear flashed across Emma's face again, and she instinctively reached for her mother's pendant. I don't know. Maybe. They said I belonged to them now, that my stepfather had signed papers. But I don't want to belong to anyone who would hurt me. Marcus felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he hadn't experienced since Rebecca's death. This child had been through unimaginable trauma, yet she had found the strength to escape and seek help. She had appeared at his clinic like an answer to prayers he hadn't even known he was praying. Emma, Marcus said, his voice carrying a conviction that surprised even him. You don't belong to those men. You don't belong to your stepfather. Children aren't property to be bought and sold. You're a human being with rights and dignity, and anyone who tries to tell you otherwise is wrong. Emma stared at him with wide eyes, as if the concept of having inherent worth was foreign to her. Really? Even though I don't have any family left, and I can't pay for things myself? Especially then, Marcus confirmed. That's when decent people are supposed to step up and help, not take advantage. It's what your mother would have wanted. For you. For the first time since she had awakened, Emma smiled. It was a hesitant, fragile expression, but it transformed her entire face, revealing the bright, intelligent child who had been hidden beneath layers of fear and trauma. Dr. Chen, Emma said hesitantly, could I maybe stay here for a little while? Just until I figure out where to go next? I promise I won't be any trouble, and I can help clean or organize things to earn my keep. The request hit Marcus squarely in the chest, reminding him of the promise he had made to Rebecca about making their clinic a safe haven for vulnerable children. For 3 years, he had let that promise gather dust while he wallowed in his own grief. Now, faced with a child who embodied everything they had hoped to help, he felt the weight of his wife's memory and his own neglected purpose. Emma, Marcus said carefully, there's something you should know about this place. My wife and I, we built this clinic with the intention of helping people exactly like you. Children who had nowhere else to go, people who needed medical care, but couldn't afford it. After she died, I kind of gave up on that dream. Emma listened intently, her soup forgotten as she absorbed his words. But meeting you, Marcus continued, finding you here like this, it feels like maybe I'm being given a second chance to honor what Rebecca and I wanted to build. So yes, you can stay. Not just for a little while, but for as long as you need. 2. This can be your home, Emma, if you want it to be. The transformation in Emma's expression was immediate and profound. Hope bloomed across her features, followed quickly by disbelief, as if such kindness was too good to be true. You really mean it? She whispered. Even though you barely know me? I mean it, Marcus confirmed, and as he spoke the words, he felt something long frozen beginning to thaw in his chest. But Emma, I need you to understand that if those men who took you are still looking for you, we might face some difficult times ahead. Are you prepared for that? Emma straightened in her chair, her small chin lifting with determination. I'm not afraid of them anymore, Dr. Chen. Not if I have someone on my side who believes I'm worth protecting. Marcus felt a smile tug at the corners of his mouth, the first genuine expression of joy he had experienced in 3 years. Then we'll face whatever comes together. And Emma, you can call me Marcus when we're not around patients. We're family now. The word hung in the air between them, loaded with promise and possibility. Emma's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than fear. Thank you, Marcus, she said softly, testing his name like a precious gift. I promise I'll make you proud. You already have, Marcus replied, and meant it completely. As the morning sun climbed higher over the Colorado peaks, streaming through the clinic windows and warming the small kitchen where they sat, Marcus Chen looked across the table at the brave girl who had appeared in his life like a miracle. For the first time in 3 years, he felt purpose flowing through his veins again, and the voice of his beloved Rebecca seemed to whisper approval from somewhere beyond the snow-covered mountains. The healing had begun, not just for Emma's physical wounds, but for the deeper injuries they both carried. And somewhere in the distance, unknown to them both, dangerous men were already beginning their search for a 12-year-old girl who had dared to run toward freedom instead of accepting the fate others had chosen for her. Part 2. The Wound Revealed. Marcus Chen woke before dawn on the second day, a habit ingrained from years of military service that even 3 years of civilian life hadn't erased. The clinic felt different somehow, charged with an energy that had been absent since Rebecca's death. For the first time in years, he had someone else to consider, someone whose well-being depended on the choices he made. He padded quietly through the living quarters, checking on Emma, who slept peacefully in the spare room he had hastily prepared for her the night before. The room had originally been intended as Rebecca's office, where she would handle the administrative side of their planned outreach programs. After her death, Marcus had simply closed the door and tried to forget the dreams that lay gathering dust behind it. Now, watching Emma sleep with her mother's pendant clutched tightly in her small fist, Marcus felt the full weight of promises he had made and broken. The spare room wasn't just a place for Emma to rest, it was a symbol of everything he had abandoned. When grief overwhelmed his sense of purpose, after ensuring Emma was comfortable, Marcus made his way to the kitchen and began preparing breakfast. The simple act of cooking for someone else felt foreign yet comforting, reminding him of the early days of his marriage when he and Rebecca would share quiet mornings before their respective shifts at the base hospital. Dr. Rebecca Hayes had been more than his wife, she had been his mission partner, his moral compass, and his constant reminder that medicine was about more than treating symptoms. She possessed an unwavering belief that healthcare was a human right, not a privilege to be rationed based on ability to pay. Her passion for serving the underserved had inspired Marcus to leave the relative security of military medicine and venture into the uncertain world of independent practice. Their plan had been elegant in its simplicity. They would establish a clinic in a small mountain town where medical resources were scarce, particularly for vulnerable populations like undocumented immigrants, trafficking victims, and families living in poverty. The clinic would operate on a sliding scale, with paying patients subsidizing care for those who couldn't afford treatment. Rebecca had researched grant opportunities, established relationships with medical supply companies willing to donate excess inventory, and even identified a network of retired medical professionals who might volunteer their services. Everything had been in place. They had purchased the building that now housed the Riverside Clinic, obtained the necessary licenses and certifications, and were just weeks away from the grand opening when Rebecca received the call that changed everything. A medical mission organization needed experienced personnel for an emergency deployment to Afghanistan, where a series of avalanches had cut off several remote villages from outside assistance. Marcus had argued against her going. They were so close to realizing their shared dream, and the deployment would delay their clinic's opening by at least 6 months. But Rebecca's sense of duty was absolute. People were dying, and she had skills that could save lives. How could she prioritize their future plans over immediate human suffering? In the end, Marcus had supported her decision, even helped her prepare for the deployment. He would stay behind to complete the clinic preparations, and she would return in time for their delayed opening. They would video call every day, she promised, and she would document everything she learned about field medicine in challenging conditions. The experience would only make their own clinic more effective. For the first month, their plan worked perfectly. Rebecca called regularly, sharing stories of the villagers she was treating and the medical innovations born from necessity. She was learning to perform complex procedures with minimal equipment, to create treatment protocols for conditions she had never encountered in modern hospitals, and to work effectively with local healers whose methods differed vastly from Western medicine. Then came the morning when Marcus's phone didn't ring at the usual time. He waited hours, telling himself that communication disruptions were common in such remote areas. Equipment failed, weather interfered with signals, and emergency medical situations took precedence over personal calls. By evening, when still no word had come, Marcus contacted the mission organization. The avalanche had struck without warning, they told him. A late-season storm had destabilized snow accumulations throughout the mountain region. Rebecca and 3 other medical personnel had been traveling between villages when the slide occurred. Search and rescue operations were underway, but conditions remained dangerous and progress was slow. For 17 days, Marcus lived in a state of suspended animation, waiting for news that never came. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except his phone and the possibility that it might ring with word of Rebecca's rescue. The clinic preparations ground to a halt as Marcus haunted the mission organization's headquarters, demanding updates and offering to join the search efforts despite having no mountain rescue training. When the call finally came, it brought the news Marcus had been dreading but somehow still wasn't prepared to hear. Rebecca's body had been recovered along with those of her colleagues. They had died instantly when the avalanche struck their vehicle, buried under tons of snow and rock in a remote canyon where rescue would have been impossible even if they had survived the initial impact. The funeral had been a blur of military honors, medical colleagues sharing memories, and well-meaning friends offering condolences that felt hollow against the magnitude of his loss. Marcus went through the motions with mechanical precision, accepting sympathy and making arrangements while feeling completely disconnected from his own life. In the weeks that followed, people kept asking about the clinic. When would it open? Did he need help completing the preparations? Would there be a memorial service there to honor Rebecca's commitment to community medicine? Each question felt like a knife twist, reminding Marcus of dreams that seemed impossible to pursue without his partner. The community had been expecting the clinic to open for months. Local newspapers had run stories about the young couple bringing affordable health care to Pine Valley. Churches had organized fundraising drives to support their mission. Families had already begun inquiring about appointments and services. Marcus knew he should honor those commitments, should complete the work he and Rebecca had started together. But every time he entered the clinic's main treatment room, he could hear her voice discussing patient care protocols. Every time he reviewed their business plans, he saw her handwriting in the margins, her ideas for community outreach and preventive care programs. The weight of continuing alone felt impossible to bear. How could he provide the kind of compassionate care that had been Rebecca's specialty? How could he maintain her vision for holistic medicine that treated patients as whole human beings rather than collections of symptoms? How could he embody the warmth and hope that had made her such an effective healer? Instead of opening the clinic as planned, Marcus had retreated into a minimalist version of medical practice. He obtained the necessary licenses to provide basic healthcare services, but made no effort to publicize his availability or reach out to the communities Rebecca had been most eager to serve. Patients found him mostly by word of mouth or emergency necessity, and he treated them competently, but without the passion that had once driven his career. For 3 years, Marcus had existed in this state of professional limbo. He was technically fulfilling his obligations as a physician, but he knew he was falling far short of the commitment he had made to Rebecca and to himself. The clinic functioned, but it wasn't thriving. He earned enough to maintain the building and cover his basic expenses, but the sliding scale payment system remained largely theoretical since he saw so few patients who couldn't afford standard rates. Most painfully, Marcus had completely abandoned the aspect of their mission that had meant the most to Rebecca, serving vulnerable populations who had nowhere else to turn. He told himself it was too complicated to manage alone, too risky without institutional support, too overwhelming for someone still processing his own grief. The truth was simpler and more damning. Marcus had been afraid of caring deeply again only to experience another devastating loss. Afraid of taking on responsibility for people whose lives hung in the balance. Afraid of failing to live up to Rebecca's example and thereby diminishing her memory. Now, as he stood in the kitchen listening to Emma stir in the next room, Marcus confronted the full extent of his betrayal of everything Rebecca had stood for. She had died serving others, living her values right up to her final moments. Meanwhile, he had spent 3 years hiding from the very mission that had defined their relationship and their shared purpose. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair tousled from sleep, but her eyes alert and watchful. She wore the oversized clothes from the donation box, but had somehow managed to make them look more fitted by rolling up sleeves and tucking in the shirt. Her mother's pendant hung prominently outside her shirt, a visible reminder of the legacy she carried. "Good morning," Marcus said, turning from the stove where eggs were cooking. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," Emma replied honestly. "The bed is really soft, and it's so quiet here. Where I came from, there was always noise engines and shouting and people crying." The casual reference to her traumatic experiences sent a familiar chill through Marcus. During his military service, he had treated children rescued from trafficking situations, and their matter-of-fact descriptions of horror always struck him as particularly heartbreaking. They had been forced to normalize experiences that should have been unthinkable. "Well, you're safe here," Marcus assured her, plating the eggs alongside toast and fresh fruit. "Nothing but mountain quiet and the occasional patient visit." Emma took her seat at the table, looking around the kitchen with curious eyes. "This is a really nice place. Did you build it yourself?" Marcus shook his head. "My wife and I bought it 3 years ago. We were planning to open a clinic that would serve people who couldn't afford regular medical care. After she died, I kind of lost track of that vision." "What happened to her?" Emma asked gently, displaying the kind of emotional intelligence that often developed in children who had faced adult hardships too early. Marcus paused, realizing this was the first time he had spoken about Rebecca's death with someone who might truly understand the experience of sudden, devastating loss. She was on a medical mission in Afghanistan when an avalanche hit. She died, trying to help people who had no other access to health care. Emma nodded solemnly, her young face reflecting genuine comprehension of such grief. "My mama died trying to protect me too. She got between my stepfather and me during one of his rages, and he hurt her so badly that she never recovered. Sometimes, I think maybe if I had been braver, if I had fought back myself, she might still be alive." The parallel between their experiences struck Marcus like a physical blow. Both of them carried guilt about the deaths of the women they loved. Both questioned whether they could have done something different to prevent the loss, and both had been shaped by the trauma of watching someone die while trying to protect others. "Emma," Marcus said carefully, "what happened to your mother wasn't your fault. Adults are supposed to protect children, not the other way around. She made a choice to put herself in danger because she loved you, not because you failed to be brave enough." "I know that in my head," Emma replied, unconsciously echoing thoughts Marcus had wrestled with for years. "But it still feels like maybe I should have done something different." Marcus found himself leaning forward, recognizing an opportunity to offer comfort while also confronting his own unresolved guilt. "I understand that feeling. After Rebecca died, I kept thinking about all the ways I could have convinced her not to go on that mission. Maybe if I had been more persuasive, or if I had offered to go with her, or if I had just refused to support her decision, she would still be alive." "But she wanted to help people," Emma said, showing wisdom beyond her years. "That's what people like her do, right? They help others even when it's dangerous." "Yes," Marcus agreed, feeling something shift in his chest as he acknowledged this. Truth. Rebecca always said that having the skills to heal people came with an obligation to use those skills, especially for people who had no other options. Emma picked at her breakfast thoughtfully. My mama said something like that too. She used to tell me that being a nurse meant being willing to help anyone who was hurting, no matter who they were or whether they could pay for it. Marcus stared at this remarkable child, seeing connections he had been blind to for 3 years. Emma's mother had been a nurse guided by the same principles that had driven Rebecca. Emma herself had escaped from traffickers and found her way to a medical clinic, almost as if she had been guided by some invisible force toward exactly the kind of help her mother would have wanted her to find. Emma, Marcus said slowly, when you were running through the mountains, what made you choose this clinic? There are other buildings along the highway, other places you could have sought shelter. Emma considered the question seriously. I saw the medical symbol on the sign, the one that looks like my mama's pendant. And there was something about the way the lights were on in the windows that made it seem safe. Like whoever was inside would understand why I needed help. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Rebecca had insisted on installing warm, welcoming lighting throughout the clinic specifically to make it feel approachable to people who might be afraid to seek medical care. She had said that healing began the moment people felt safe enough to ask for help. The realization struck Marcus with startling clarity. Emma's arrival wasn't just a coincidence or a random twist of fate. This 12-year-old trafficking survivor, carrying her nurse mother's pendant and embodying all the values Rebecca had lived for, had appeared at their clinic like an answer to prayers he hadn't even known he was praying. For the first time since Rebecca's death, Marcus felt something that might eventually grow into hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of early grief that looked for signs and meanings in every random event, but the quiet, steady hope of someone beginning to see a path forward through the darkness. Emma, Marcus said, his voice carrying new conviction, I want to tell you something about this place. This clinic was supposed to be a haven for people exactly like you. Children who had been hurt or exploited, families who couldn't afford medical care, anyone who needed healing and had nowhere else to turn. Emma's eyes widened with interest. Like a special hospital for people no one else would help. Exactly like that. Rebecca and I planned every detail, from the sliding scale payment system to the trauma-informed care protocols for abuse survivors. We researched the legal requirements for treating undocumented patients, established relationships with social service agencies, and even planned educational programs to teach people about their healthcare rights. What happened to all those plans? Emma asked. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest, but this time it was accompanied by something new, a sense that he might finally be ready to confront his failures and perhaps transform them into renewed purpose. I abandoned them, Marcus admitted. After Rebecca died, I convinced myself that I couldn't carry out our mission alone. I told myself it was too complicated, too risky, too much for one person to handle. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of caring that much about anything again. Scared of taking on that kind of responsibility. Scared of failing to live up to Rebecca's example. Emma reached across the table and touched Marcus's hand with her small fingers. The gesture was simple but profound, a child offering comfort to an adult who had forgotten how to accept it. Maybe, Emma said quietly, you weren't supposed to do it alone. Maybe you were supposed to wait until the right person came along to help you remember why it mattered. Marcus looked into Emma's earnest face and felt the last walls around, his heart beginning to crumble. This brave, wise child had lost everything, yet still possessed the capacity to offer hope to others. If she could maintain faith in the possibility of healing and family after everything she had endured, how could he continue to hide from his own calling? Emma, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion he had suppressed for too long, would you like to help me figure out how to make this clinic what Rebecca and your mother would have wanted it to be? The smile that spread across Emma's face was like sunrise after the longest night, radiant with possibility and joy. Yes, she said simply. I think that's exactly what we're supposed to do. As they finished breakfast together, Marcus felt the presence of two strong women whose love had shaped them both, whose dreams could still be realized through their combined determination to heal and help others. The work ahead would be challenging, and they would face obstacles neither of them could yet imagine. But for the first time in 3 years, Marcus Chen believed in the future again. Part 3. External threat emerges. The call came 3 days later. just as Marcus was beginning to believe that Emma's escape had gone unnoticed by her captors. He was reviewing medical supply catalogs with Emma, explaining how to calculate inventory needs based on projected patient volumes, when his clinic phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Riverside Clinic, Dr. Chen speaking. Marcus answered in his professional tone, assuming it was a potential patient or medical supply company. Dr. Chen, a smooth, cultured voice replied. My name is Detective Ray Sullivan from the Colorado State Police. I'm calling about a missing child case that might have reached your area. Marcus felt Emma freeze beside him, her face instantly draining of color. She had been laughing at his explanation of medical abbreviations just moments before, but now she looked like a frightened animal ready to bolt. I see, Marcus said carefully, moving to place himself between Emma and the phone as if he could physically shield her from the conversation. What can I help you with, detective? We're looking for a 12-year-old Hispanic female, approximately 4 feet tall, dark hair, brown eyes. She disappeared from a rest stop about 50 miles south of your location 3 days ago. Family is very concerned, as you can imagine. The description was accurate enough to make Marcus's blood run cold, but the mention of concerned family set off every alarm bell in his medical training. Emma had described being sold by her stepfather to men who planned to traffic her across state lines. No legitimate family member would be working with law enforcement to find her. I haven't seen anyone matching that description, Marcus lied smoothly, his years of military training helping him maintain an even tone. But I'll certainly keep an eye out. Do you have contact information where I can reach you if anything comes up? Actually, Dr. Chen, I was hoping I could stop by your clinic later today. We're canvassing all the medical facilities in the area, since the girl might seek medical attention if she's been hiding outdoors. Would around 2 o'clock work for you? Marcus glanced at Emma, who was shaking her head frantically while mouthing no with obvious terror. Whatever this detective represented, it wasn't safety or legitimate law enforcement in Emma's mind. I'm afraid I have patient appointments all afternoon, Marcus said, improvising quickly. Would tomorrow morning be better? Say around 10 o'clock? Tomorrow works fine, the detective replied. I appreciate your cooperation, Dr. Chen. This little girl's family is desperate to have her home safely. After hanging up, Marcus immediately turned to Emma, who had wrapped her arms around herself and was rocking slightly in her chair. The transformation from confident, curious child to traumatized victim was heartbreaking to witness. Emma, talk to me, Marcus said gently, kneeling beside her chair. Who was that really? Because I'm certain it wasn't a legitimate police detective. Emma's voice came out in a whisper. That was Vincent Cross. He's the man who bought me from my stepfather. He always said he used to be a cop before he went into business for himself. He knows how to sound official, how to make people believe he's still working for the law. Marcus felt ice forming in his veins. You're absolutely certain it was him? I'll never forget that voice, Emma said, shuddering. He used it when he was trying to convince the other girls that cooperating would be easier than fighting. He made it sound like he was just doing his job, like helping him was the same as helping the police. Marcus's military training kicked into high gear, his mind automatically shifting into tactical assessment mode. They were dealing with someone who had law enforcement experience, which meant he would be skilled in investigation, tracking, and potentially armed confrontation. Worse, Cross was clearly comfortable impersonating police officers, which gave him an enormous advantage in dealing with civilians who would naturally trust law enforcement. Emma, I need you to tell me everything you know about this man. His full name, what he looks like, how many people work with him, what kind of vehicle he drives, anything that might help us understand what we're facing. Emma took a shaky breath and began to describe Vincent Cross in detail. He was approximately 45 years old, tall and lean with graying brown hair and pale blue eyes that she described as cold like winter ice. He dressed professionally, usually in dark suits that made him look like a businessman or government agent. He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority and used his knowledge of police procedures to intimidate both his victims and anyone who might question his activities. Cross traveled with at least 3 other men, though Emma had seen evidence that his organization was larger than just the crew who had transported her. He operated primarily out of a black SUV with tinted windows and government-style license plates that she suspected were either stolen or forged. His method involved purchasing children from desperate or abusive family members, then transporting them across state lines to buyers who wanted specific types of victims. He told us we were going to work as maids for rich families in California. Emma explained, her voice growing stronger as she shared information that might help protect them. But I heard him talking on the phone about buyers who wanted specific ages and appearances. He was describing us like we were merchandise. Marcus felt his hands clenching into fists as Emma described the casual way Cross discussed human trafficking. The man was clearly a predator who had systematized his evil, turning the exploitation of children into a cold business calculation. How did you know to run when you did? Marcus asked. He made a mistake, Emma said with a flash of pride. He was talking to one of his men about the delivery schedule, and he left his phone on speaker while they were outside the van getting gas. I heard him say that once we crossed into California, we would be sold to different buyers and that the girls who caused trouble would go to worse places as punishment examples. The courage it had taken for Emma to escape under those circumstances was staggering. She had been surrounded by armed men, far from any familiar territory, with no resources except her determination to avoid the fate Cross had planned for her. Emma, listen to me very carefully, Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority he had used when treating wounded soldiers under fire. Vincent Cross is not going to get anywhere near you. I promise you that. But we need to be smart about how we handle this. Marcus's mind raced through possible responses to Cross's imminent visit. The man clearly suspected that Emma had found shelter at the clinic, but he couldn't be certain. If Marcus could convince him that Emma hadn't been there, Cross might continue searching elsewhere, buying them time to develop a longer-term plan. What are we going to do? Emma asked, her trust in Marcus evident despite her fear. First, we're going to call Detective Sarah Williams, the one real police officer I know in this area, Marcus said, reaching for his phone. She needs to know that someone is impersonating law enforcement, and she needs to understand the situation we're dealing with. Detective Sarah Williams had been one of the first people to welcome Marcus to Pine Valley when he had moved there with Rebecca. She was a 15-year veteran of local law enforcement who had built a reputation for integrity and competence, particularly in cases involving crimes against children. If anyone could help them navigate the legal complexities of Emma's situation, it would be Sarah. Detective Williams, this is Dr. Marcus Chen at the Riverside Clinic, Marcus said when Sarah answered her phone. I need to report someone impersonating a police officer, and I have a situation that requires immediate assistance. Sarah's response was immediate and professional. Are you in immediate danger, Dr. Chen? Not immediately, but potentially soon. I'd rather explain in person if possible. Can you come to the clinic? I'm 20 minutes away. Don't open the door for anyone else until I get there. While they waited for Sarah to arrive, Marcus helped Emma prepare for what would likely be a difficult conversation. They needed to tell Sarah everything about Emma's escape and Cross's pursuit. But Marcus wanted to ensure that Emma felt safe and supported throughout the discussion. Sarah Williams is one of the good ones, Marcus assured Emma as they sat together in the clinic's main room. She spent her career protecting people, especially children. She'll believe you, and she'll help us figure out how to keep you safe. Emma nodded, though Marcus could see the anxiety in her posture. What if she says I have to go back? What if the law says my stepfather still has rights over me? Marcus felt a surge of protective anger at the thought of Emma being returned to the man who had sold her into trafficking. That's not going to happen, Emma. Children have rights too, and what your stepfather did to you was illegal. Sarah will help us make sure you're protected. When Detective Williams arrived, she proved to be exactly what Marcus had hoped: professional, compassionate, and immediately focused on Emma's safety rather than bureaucratic procedures. She listened carefully as Emma recounted her experiences, asking clarifying questions without making the girl feel like she was being interrogated. Emma, you've been incredibly brave, Sarah said after hearing the full story. Everything you've described about Vincent Cross matches intelligence we've been gathering about a trafficking operation that's been moving through this region. Your information could help us shut down his entire network. But what about tomorrow? Marcus asked. He's planning to come here at 10 o'clock, and he clearly suspects that Emma is here. Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. That gives us an opportunity. If we handle this correctly, we can gather evidence against Cross while ensuring Emma's safety. But it will require careful coordination. The plan Sarah outlined was both simple and dangerous. Marcus would meet with Cross as scheduled, wearing a concealed recording device that would capture any incriminating statements. Meanwhile, Sarah and backup officers would be positioned nearby, ready to intervene if Cross became threatening or if he provided enough evidence to justify an arrest. The key is getting him to admit to his trafficking activities on tape, Sarah explained. If he thinks you know where Emma is, he might reveal information about his operation while trying to convince you to cooperate. Marcus felt his pulse, quicken at the thought of facing Cross directly, but he also recognized the importance of the opportunity. If they could gather enough evidence to arrest Cross and dismantle his network, Emma would be truly safe, and other children would be protected from the same fate. What about Emma during all this? Marcus asked. I won't put her at risk. She'll be in protective custody at a safe house until we resolve this, Sarah assured him. We have procedures for protecting trafficking victims during investigations. Emma's face fell at the mention of being taken away from the clinic. Do I have to leave? I feel safe here with Marcus. Sarah looked between Marcus and Emma, clearly recognizing the bond that had formed between them. The safe house is just temporary, Emma. Once we deal with Cross and complete the initial investigation, we can discuss longer-term arrangements. Marcus found himself stepping forward, surprising himself with the vehemence of his response. Emma stays with me. I understand the need for protection, but she's been through enough upheaval. If you need to station officers here or implement additional security measures, fine. But Emma shouldn't have to leave the first stable home she's found. Sarah studied Marcus's face, seeing something there that made her reconsider her initial recommendation. Dr. Chen, are you prepared for what protecting Emma might mean? Vincent Cross doesn't give up easily, and he has resources and connections that could make your life very complicated. Marcus thought of Rebecca, of the promises he had made and broken, of the clinic's original mission to serve vulnerable populations regardless of the risks involved. Emma represented everything he and Rebecca had wanted to protect, and he would not fail again. I'm prepared, Marcus said firmly. This clinic was always meant to be a safe haven for people like Emma. It's time I started living up to that commitment. Emma's face brightened with relief and gratitude, while Sarah nodded slowly, recognizing the determination in Marcus's voice. All right then, Sarah said. We'll do this together. But Dr. Chen, once we start down this path, there's no backing out. Cross will see you as an enemy, and that means Emma will need protection for more than just a few days. Marcus looked at Emma, seeing in her brave young face the future he and Rebecca had dreamed of creating. A future where their clinic truly served as a sanctuary for the vulnerable, where healing extended beyond medical treatment to encompass protection, hope, and genuine care. I understand, Marcus said, and I'm ready. As Sarah began outlining the specific details of their plan for the next day's confrontation with Cross, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since Rebecca's death, the certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. Emma had brought more than just herself to his clinic, she had brought him back to his true purpose. Part 4. The catalyst arrival the evening before Vincent Cross's scheduled visit. Marcus found himself unable to sleep. He paced the clinic's main room, reviewing every detail of Detective Williams's plan while trying to anticipate potential complications. Emma had been equally restless, emerging from her room several times to find Marcus still awake, both of them drawing comfort from each other's presence during the anxious hours. Are you scared about tomorrow? Emma asked during one of these midnight encounters, settling into the chair beside Marcus's desk, where he was reviewing patient files to distract himself. Marcus considered lying to protect her from his own anxiety, then decided that honesty would serve them both better. Yes, I'm scared, but not of Vincent Cross himself. I'm scared of making a mistake that could put you in danger. Emma nodded solemnly. I'm scared too, but I'm also angry. My mama always told me that anger could be useful if you pointed it in the right direction, toward fixing things instead of just being mad. The wisdom in her words struck Marcus deeply. Rebecca had often said something similar about channeling difficult emotions into positive action. It seemed that both of their lost loved ones had understood something about transforming pain into purpose. Your mother sounds like she was a very wise woman, Marcus said. What else did she teach you? About dealing with difficult situations? Emma's face brightened as she accessed memories of her mother's guidance. She said that helpers always find each other when they're needed most. That's why I knew you would help me when I saw the medical symbol on your clinic sign. Mama said, people who dedicate their lives to healing others share a kind of invisible connection. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. Rebecca had expressed almost identical beliefs about the community of healers, the sense that medical professionals were called not just to treat disease, but to serve as guardians for the vulnerable. She had often talked about the network of compassionate people who would support their clinic's mission, drawn together by shared values rather than formal organizations. Emma, Marcus said slowly, when you escaped from Cross and his men, what made you believe you could find help? Most children in your situation would have been too terrified to trust any adult. Emma considered the question carefully. I remembered something my mama told me after my stepfather started getting violent. She said that if anything ever happened to her, I should look for people who had chosen to spend their lives helping others. She said they would understand what it meant to protect someone weaker than themselves. The parallels between Emma's mother's guidance and Rebecca's philosophy were becoming impossible to ignore. Both women had understood that healing extended far beyond medical treatment, that true care required a willingness to stand between the vulnerable and those who would harm them. As dawn approached, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of trying to rest before the confrontation with Cross, he led Emma to the room that had remained locked for 3 years, Rebecca's intended office, where all their original plans for the clinic were stored. I want to show you something, Marcus said, unlocking the door with hands that trembled slightly. These are the dreams your arrival has reminded me to pursue. The office was exactly as Rebecca had left it, covered with dust, but otherwise untouched. Charts showing demographics of underserved populations in the region covered one wall. Another displayed floor plans for expanding the clinic to include counseling services and educational programs. File cabinets contained grant applications, partnership agreements with social service agencies, and detailed protocols for treating trafficking victims. Emma moved through the room with reverent curiosity, studying the evidence of Rebecca's passionate commitment to serving others. She planned all this for people like me? For people exactly like you, Marcus confirmed. Rebecca believed that healthcare was meaningless if it only served those who could afford it. She wanted this clinic to be a place where anyone could find healing, regardless of their circumstances or immigration status or ability to pay. Emma paused before a bulletin board covered with photographs of children from various humanitarian crises around the world. These are the people she wanted to help. Marcus nodded, feeling Rebecca's presence strongly in the room where her dreams had taken tangible form. She used to say that every child in those pictures deserved the same quality of care she would want for her own children. Even though we never had kids ourselves, she felt responsible for protecting other people's children. She would have liked my mama, Emma said with quiet confidence. They both understood about taking care of people who couldn't take care of themselves. As Marcus watched Emma absorbing the scope of Rebecca's vision, he realized that his late wife's influence was still actively shaping events. Emma's mother had guided her daughter toward medical help. Rebecca's planning had prepared the clinic to serve trafficking victims, and both women's values were now compelling Marcus to honor commitments he had abandoned in grief. Emma, Marcus said, his voice carrying new resolve. After we deal with Cross, I want to reopen all these programs. Not just for you, but for everyone who needs what Rebecca planned to offer. Will you help me figure out how to make it work? Emma's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Yes, Mama always said I was good at organizing things and talking to people who were scared. Maybe I could help other kids who've been through what I have. The transformation in Emma as she contemplated helping others was remarkable. The frightened, traumatized child who had collapsed outside his clinic was evolving into a young person with purpose and hope. Marcus recognized the same pattern in himself. He had been gradually returning to life through the act of caring for Emma. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Detective Williams, who came early to review final preparations for the day's operation. She found Marcus and Emma in Rebecca's office, surrounded by the evidence of dreams long deferred. I see you're making plans for the future, Sarah observed, noting the determined expressions on both their faces. We're preparing to honor some promises that should have been kept long ago, Marcus replied. Emma has helped me remember what this clinic was always supposed to be. Sarah smiled approvingly. Good. Children like Emma need advocates who are committed for the long term, not just during the immediate crisis. Speaking of which, are you both ready for what's coming this morning? Marcus felt his stomach tighten with pre-operation nerves. The familiar combination of fear and determination that had sustained him through countless emergency medical situations. As ready as we can be. Emma will be in the safe room during Cross's visit. They had identified a small storage room adjacent to Marcus's living quarters that could be secured from the inside and had no external windows. Emma would wait there, with a police radio, able to hear everything that transpired but protected from direct contact with Cross. I'll be monitoring everything from the surveillance van, Sarah assured them. At the first sign of threat, or if Cross provides sufficient evidence of criminal activity, my team will move in immediately. Emma had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke up with a question that revealed her deep understanding of the stakes involved. What happens if Mr. Cross doesn't admit to anything? What if he's too smart to say something that would get him arrested? Sarah's expression grew serious as she considered Emma's astute question. That's a real possibility, Emma. Vincent Cross has clearly been doing this for a long time, and former law enforcement officers understand how evidence works. He might be very careful about what he says, especially if he suspects he's being recorded. Marcus felt a chill at this possibility. If Cross simply claimed to be looking for a missing child and avoided any mention of trafficking, they would have no grounds for arrest. He could leave the clinic and continue his pursuit of Emma through other means, potentially returning with greater force or more sophisticated methods. But we have advantages too, Sarah continued, clearly recognizing the concern on their faces. Cross is under pressure to recover Emma quickly. Trafficking operations depend on maintaining schedules and meeting buyer expectations. The longer Emma remains missing, the more his business credibility suffers. That pressure might make him less cautious than he should be. Emma nodded thoughtfully. He was always talking about deadlines and delivery schedules. He treated us like packages that had to arrive on time, or he would lose money. The casual way Emma described being treated as merchandise sent another wave of anger through Marcus. Vincent Cross wasn't just a criminal, he was a predator who had systematized the dehumanization of children. The thought of such a person walking free while children like Emma lived in fear was intolerable. There's something else, Sarah added, her tone growing more confident. Cross made a tactical error by calling you directly, Dr. Chen. We've been able to trace that call, and it didn't come from a legitimate police department. That alone gives us grounds to question him about impersonating an officer. Marcus felt a spark of hope. So even if he doesn't admit to trafficking, we can still arrest him for the impersonation? Exactly. And once we have him in custody on that charge, we can dig deeper into his activities. Emma's testimony about being purchased and transported across state lines will carry significant weight, especially if we can connect it to other missing children cases. Emma shifted uncomfortably at the mention of her testimony. Will I have to stand up in court and tell everyone what happened to me? Sarah's expression softened with understanding. Eventually, yes, that might be necessary. But Emma, remember that your testimony could prevent the same thing from happening to other children. You have the power to protect kids who are going through what you experienced. Marcus watched Emma process this information, seeing her way, her own discomfort against the possibility of helping others. It was a profound moral choice for someone so young, and he found himself admiring her courage even more. I'll do it, Emma said finally, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. My mama always said that people who can speak up for those who can't have an obligation to do so. The conversation was interrupted by a knock at the clinic's front door. All three of them froze, checking the clock that showed only 8:30 in the morning. Cross wasn't supposed to arrive for another hour and a half. Sarah immediately moved into tactical mode, drawing her sidearm and positioning herself near the window where she could observe the front entrance. Dr. Chen, don't answer that door. Emma, get to the safe room now. Marcus felt his heart rate spike as Emma quickly gathered her mother's pendant and disappeared toward the secure storage area they had prepared. Through the window, he could see a figure on the front porch, but the angle made it impossible to determine who was there. The knocking came again, more insistent this time, followed by a voice that made Marcus's blood run cold. Dr. Chen, this is Detective Sullivan. I know you're in there, and I think we need to have a conversation about the missing girl. Sarah held up her hand, signaling Marcus to remain silent. Cross had arrived early, clearly hoping to catch them off guard. The change in schedule suggested either tactical sophistication or growing desperation, both of which made him more dangerous. "I'm going to go around back and call for backup," Sarah whispered to Marcus. "Keep him talking if he speaks again, but don't let him inside under any circumstances." As Sarah slipped out the clinic's rear exit, Marcus found himself alone with Vincent Cross just a door and a few feet away. The man who had terrorized Emma, who had turned child trafficking into a business operation, was standing on the porch of the clinic that was supposed to be a sanctuary. Cross spoke again, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to intimidating others. "Dr. Chen, I can see movement inside. I'm investigating a serious crime involving a missing child, and I need your cooperation. Please open the door so we can discuss this professionally." Marcus remained silent, following Sarah's instructions while his mind raced through possible scenarios. Cross clearly suspected that Emma was in the clinic, but he couldn't be certain. His early arrival suggested impatience, which might work in their favor if it led him to make mistakes. "Doctor, I understand your hesitation," Cross continued, his tone becoming slightly more threatening. "But obstructing a police investigation is a serious matter. I'm sure you don't want to face charges for harboring a runaway child." The manipulation, in Cross's words, was expertly crafted. He was using the language of legitimate law enforcement while subtly threatening Marcus with legal consequences. For someone who didn't know the truth about Cross's identity, the approach would likely be very effective. Marcus heard the faint sound of vehicles approaching the clinic, hopefully Sarah's backup rather than additional members of Cross's organization. The next few minutes would determine whether their plan succeeded or whether they would face a much more dangerous confrontation. "Dr. Chen," Cross called again, and this time his voice carried a harder edge. "I'm going to count to 10, and then I'm coming inside whether you open the door or not." 1. Marcus felt his military training kick in, the familiar calm that descended during high-stress situations where clear thinking could mean the difference between life and death. Cross was escalating the situation, moving from manipulation to direct threats. This could provide the evidence they needed, but it also meant the immediate danger was increasing. 2. 3. Cross's count continued with mechanical precision, each number designed to build psychological pressure. Marcus moved to where he could see Emma's hiding place, making sure she remained secure while staying close enough to the front of the clinic to be heard by Sarah's recording equipment. Everything depended on capturing Cross's words while keeping Emma safe. 4. 5. 6. The sound of car doors slamming came from multiple directions around the clinic. Marcus hoped desperately that it was law enforcement rather than Cross's reinforcements arriving to complicate an already volatile situation. 7. 8. Cross's voice suddenly stopped, and Marcus heard the unmistakable sound of running footsteps on the front porch. Sarah's voice cut through the morning air with clear authority. "Vincent Cross, you're under arrest for impersonating a police officer. Put your hands where I can see them and step away from the door." Marcus felt a surge of relief mixed with continued anxiety. They had Cross in custody, but the situation was far from resolved. Through the window, he could see additional police vehicles arriving, their occupants quickly positioning themselves around the clinic's perimeter. Cross's response was immediate and telling. Instead of confusion or protests of innocence, he immediately began calculating his legal position. "Detective Williams, I assume. I'm conducting a legitimate investigation into a missing child. You're interfering with official police business. Show me your badge and identification," Sarah commanded, clearly following proper procedure while knowing that Cross couldn't produce legitimate credentials. "My identification was stolen yesterday during the search operation," Cross replied smoothly. "I've been working with local departments throughout the region on this case. Check with your dispatcher, they'll confirm my assignment." Marcus marveled at Cross's quick thinking and professional demeanor. Even caught in the act of impersonating an officer, he was maintaining his cover story with practiced ease. Without Emma's testimony and the evidence they hoped to gather, Cross might actually talk his way out of the immediate situation. Sarah's voice came again, still professional but with underlying steel. "Mr. Cross, I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning. We can sort out any misunderstandings at the station." "I don't think that will be necessary," Cross replied, and Marcus could hear the confidence returning to his voice. Perhaps Dr. Chen would be willing to join our conversation. I'm sure he can help clarify whether he's seen the missing girl I'm looking for. Marcus realized that Cross was trying to manipulate the situation to his advantage, hoping to get inside the clinic where he might be able to confirm Emma's presence or gather other useful information. The man's tactical thinking was impressive and frightening in equal measure. Dr. Chun is not part of this discussion, Sarah said firmly. You're coming with me now, Mr. Cross. We can do this cooperatively, or we can do it the hard way. There was a long moment of silence, during which Marcus imagined Cross weighing his options. The man clearly understood that his impersonation gambit had failed, but he might still believe he could escape serious consequences if he avoided admitting to more serious crimes. Very well, Detective Williams, Cross said finally, his tone suggesting resigned cooperation. I suppose we'll need to contact my superiors to clear up this confusion. Marcus heard the sound of handcuffs clicking into place, followed by Sarah reading Cross's rights. The immediate threat was neutralized, but he knew this was just the beginning of a longer, more complex battle. Cross would undoubtedly have lawyers, potentially corrupt contacts in law enforcement, and resources that could make their lives very difficult. Sarah's voice came through the clinic's front door, clearly addressing Marcus. Dr. Chun, it's safe to come out now. We have the situation under control. Marcus made his way to Emma's hiding place, finding her curled in the corner of the storage room with her mother's pendant clutched tightly in both hands. Her face was pale but determined, and she looked up at him with eyes that held both fear and hope. Is he really arrested? Emma asked quietly. He's in custody, Marcus confirmed, helping her to her feet. Detective Williams and her team have him. You're safe, Emma. Emma nodded, but Marcus could see that she understood the difference between immediate safety and long-term security. Cross's arrest was a crucial first step, but it didn't guarantee that other members of his organization wouldn't continue pursuing her. As they emerged from the clinic's interior, Marcus saw Cross being placed in the back of a police car. Even in handcuffs, the man maintained an air of confidence that suggested he believed his situation was temporary. He caught sight of Marcus through the clinic window and smiled a cold, predatory expression that promised future consequences. Sarah approached the clinic's entrance, her professional mask slipping slightly to reveal genuine satisfaction. We got him, Dr. Chun. Vincent Cross is officially in custody on charges of impersonating a police officer, and that's just the beginning. What happens now? Marcus asked, keeping one protective arm around Emma's shoulders. Now we build the case, Sarah replied. Emma's testimony about being purchased and transported across state lines gives us federal trafficking charges to pursue. Cross's phone records, travel patterns, and financial transactions will all be scrutinized. We're going to dismantle his entire operation. Emma looked up at Sarah with cautious optimism. Does that mean other kids who were taken will be found? That's exactly what it means, Sarah assured her. Emma, your courage in escaping and speaking up is going to save other children. You should be very proud of what you've accomplished. Marcus felt a profound sense of completion as he watched Emma absorb the magnitude of what her bravery had achieved. She had not only escaped her own captivity, but had provided law enforcement with the evidence needed to protect other vulnerable children. Rebecca would have been incredibly proud of both Emma's courage and Marcus's decision to protect her. In the days following Vincent Cross's arrest, the Riverside Clinic became a hub of activity that Marcus hadn't experienced since Rebecca's death. FBI agents interviewed Emma about Cross's trafficking network, social workers evaluated her needs and legal status, and journalists began investigating the broader scope of child trafficking in the region. Through it all, Marcus found himself not just caring for Emma as a patient, but advocating for her as a guardian might. The transformation was gradual but unmistakable. Marcus discovered himself fighting bureaucratic battles to ensure Emma's comfort during interviews, researching educational options to help her catch up on schooling she had missed, and making long-term plans that assumed her permanent presence in his life. Each decision felt natural and right, as if he were finally fulfilling his true purpose. Emma, meanwhile, was blossoming in ways that amazed everyone who worked with her. The frightened, traumatized child who had collapsed outside the clinic was evolving into a confident young person with a clear sense of her own worth and potential. Her intelligence and emotional maturity impressed the FBI agents. Her warmth charmed the social workers, and her determination inspired Marcus to pursue dreams he had abandoned. "I've been thinking about what you said," Emma told Marcus one evening, as they sat together reviewing educational materials the school district had provided, about reopening all of Mrs. Rebecca's programs for people who need help. Marcus looked up from the grant applications he had been studying, struck by the thoughtful expression on Emma's face. "What kinds of thoughts have you been having?" Emma set down her workbook and moved to the bulletin board covered with Rebecca's photographs of children from humanitarian crises around the world. "I think Mrs. Rebecca understood something really important about helping people. It's not enough to just treat their injuries or sickness. You have to help them feel safe and valued too." The observation was remarkably sophisticated for someone Emma's age, but Marcus had learned not to underestimate her insights. Her experiences had given her a profound understanding of human vulnerability and resilience that many adults never developed. "Can you explain what you mean by that?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Emma pointed to one of the photographs, showing a young boy receiving medical treatment in what appeared to be a refugee camp. "When I first got here, I was hurt and sick, but the scariest part was not knowing if anyone would want to help me, not knowing if I was worth protecting. You didn't just give me medicine and food. You made me feel like I belonged somewhere." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Emma had articulated something he had been struggling to understand about his own healing process. Caring for her had restored his sense of purpose, not just as a physician, but as a human being committed to protecting the vulnerable. "Mrs. Rebecca's plans," Emma continued, studying the charts and documents Rebecca had created, "they're all about making people feel like they belong. Free medical care, legal assistance, counseling services, educational programs. It's like she wanted to build a place where people could rebuild their whole lives, not just get their immediate problems fixed." Marcus joined Emma at the bulletin board, seeing Rebecca's vision through new eyes. His late wife had understood that true healing required addressing not just physical ailments, but the social, emotional, and economic factors that created vulnerability in the first place. "Emma," Marcus said slowly, "would you be interested in helping me figure out how to make Rebecca's plans work in practice? Not just as something we talk about, but as programs we actually implement?" Emma's face lit up with excitement. "Really? You would trust me to help with something that important?" "I can't think of anyone better qualified," Marcus replied honestly. "You understand what it feels like to need help, and you've experienced what good care can accomplish. Plus, you have insights that none of the rest of us possess." The conversation was interrupted by a phone call from Detective Williams, who had been coordinating the ongoing investigation into Cross's trafficking network. Her news was both encouraging and sobering. "Dr. Chen, I wanted to update you on the Cross case," Sarah said. "We've made significant progress, but there are some complications you need to know about." Marcus felt his stomach tighten with anxiety. "What kind of complications?" "The good news is that Cross's arrest has led to the rescue of 7 other children who were being held at different locations." Emma's information about his network and methods was incredibly accurate and helpful. Marcus felt Emma squeeze his hand as she overheard Sarah's words. The knowledge that her courage had directly resulted in other children being saved clearly meant a great deal to her. "The complication," Sarah continued, "is that Cross's organization is larger and more sophisticated than we initially realized. We've identified at least 12 other individuals involved in the network, including several who are still at large. They have significant financial resources and some concerning connections to legitimate businesses and government agencies." Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. "What does that mean for Emma's safety?" "It means we need to be very careful for the foreseeable future," Sarah admitted. "Cross himself is in federal custody and won't be getting out anytime soon. But his associates have powerful incentives to silence witnesses and recover their investments." Emma had been listening intently to Marcus's side of the conversation, and now she spoke up with a question that revealed her understanding of their situation. "Are they going to keep trying to find me?" Marcus put the phone on speaker so Emma could hear Sarah's response directly. "Emma, I'm not going to lie to you. There is some ongoing risk, and we're taking it very seriously. But you're not alone in this. We have resources and people committed to keeping you safe." "What kinds of precautions do we need to take?" Marcus asked, his mind already shifting into protective mode. Sarah outlined a series of security measures that would be implemented around the clinic and Marcus's residence. Local law enforcement would increase patrols in the area. FBI agents would maintain periodic contact to monitor any threats, and both Marcus and Emma would be provided with emergency communication devices. Dr. Chen, Sarah added, I need to ask you directly. Are you prepared for what protecting Emma long-term might involve? This isn't just about the immediate aftermath of Cross's arrest. If you're going to serve as Emma's guardian, you're accepting responsibility for her safety potentially for years to come. Marcus looked at Emma, seeing in her brave young face everything that had been missing from his life since Rebecca's death. Purpose, hope, the daily joy of caring for someone who depended on him, and the opportunity to honor the promises he had made to his late wife. Detective Williams, Marcus said with complete certainty, Emma is my family now. Whatever protecting her requires, I'm prepared to do it. Emma's eyes filled with tears at his declaration, but they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than fear. Really? Even if it's dangerous? Even if it makes your life more complicated? Especially then, Marcus replied, echoing the words Rebecca had once used when explaining why they should establish their clinic despite the challenges involved. The best things in life usually require some risk and effort. Sarah's voice came through the phone with warmth and approval. In that case, Dr. Chen, we'll work together to make sure Emma has the protection and support she needs. I'll start the paperwork to formalize your guardianship and ensure Emma has all the legal protections available to trafficking survivors. After ending the call with Sarah, Marcus and Emma spent the evening discussing what their new family arrangement would look like in practical terms. Emma would need to be enrolled in school, though they would need to be careful about protecting her identity and location. Marcus would need to learn about parenting a traumatized child, understanding her triggers, and helping her continue healing from her experiences. Marcus, Emma said as they prepared for bed. Can I ask you something personal? Anything, Marcus replied, settling into the chair beside her bed where he had taken to sitting while she fell asleep, a routine that helped both of them feel secure. Do you think Mrs. Rebecca would approve of me being here? I mean, I know she wanted to help kids like me, but do you think she would be happy that you chose me specifically to be your family? Marcus felt his heart contract with love for this remarkable child who worried about living up to the expectations of a woman she had never met. Emma, I think Rebecca would take one look at your courage, your kindness, and your determination to help other people, and she would consider herself the luckiest woman in the world to have you carry on her work. Emma smiled as she settled under the quilt Rebecca had made for the guest room. I hope someday I can be as good at helping people as she was. You already are, Marcus assured her. You saved yourself, you helped us catch Vincent Cross, and you're going to help other children by telling your story. Rebecca would be incredibly proud. As Emma drifted off to sleep, Marcus remained in the chair beside her bed, marveling at how completely his life had changed in just a few weeks. The empty, purposeless existence he had been living since Rebecca's death had been transformed into something rich with meaning and possibility. Emma had arrived at his clinic as a desperate child in need of medical care, but she had brought with her something far more valuable than Marcus had initially recognized. She had brought the key to unlocking his own healing, the catalyst that would transform both their lives and honor the memory of two remarkable women who had understood the true meaning of service to others. Part 5. Initial resistance despite his public declaration of commitment to Emma and his apparent embrace of renewed purpose. Marcus found himself wrestling with private doubts that emerged in the quiet hours when Emma was asleep and he was alone with his thoughts. The reality of becoming a guardian to a traumatized child, of reopening the clinic's ambitious community programs, and of potentially facing ongoing threats from Cross's associates felt overwhelming in ways he hadn't anticipated. The first signs of his internal resistance appeared during his conversations with the social workers assigned to evaluate Emma's case. Mrs. Patricia Hendricks was a veteran child welfare specialist with 3 decades of experience placing trafficking survivors in appropriate care situations. Her questions about Marcus's preparedness for long-term guardianship were thorough and sometimes uncomfortably perceptive. Dr. Chen, Mrs. Hendricks said during their second meeting, I want to discuss your support systems. Parenting any child requires a network of resources, but caring for a trafficking survivor involves specialized challenges. Do you have experience with childhood trauma? Have you considered the impact on your own mental health? Marcus found himself defensive in ways that surprised him. I'm a physician with military experience treating trauma victims. I understand the medical and psychological aspects of what Emma has been through. Medical knowledge is certainly valuable, Mrs. Hendricks agreed diplomatically, but parenting is different from treating patients. You can't maintain professional detachment when a child is having nightmares in your home, when she's triggered by unexpected sounds, or when she's testing boundaries to see if you'll abandon her like other adults have. The conversation forced Marcus to confront questions he had been avoiding. Was he truly prepared for the daily reality of caring for Emma, or was he responding to an idealized vision of himself as a heroic guardian? Could he handle the inevitable challenges and setbacks that would come with helping a traumatized child heal? Most troubling, was he using Emma's needs as a way to avoid dealing with his own unresolved grief? That evening, as he and Emma worked together on her schoolwork, Marcus found himself studying her with new awareness of the responsibility he was accepting. She approached her studies with intense focus, clearly determined to excel despite her interrupted education. But he also noticed the way she startled at unexpected noises, the careful way she monitored his moods for signs of displeasure, and the anxious questions about whether she was being too much trouble. Emma, Marcus said during a break in their homework session, can I ask you something honestly? Are you happy here? Or do you feel like you have to be grateful because I helped you? Emma looked up from her math problems with surprise at the direct question. I am happy here. Really happy. But sometimes I worry that you might change your mind about wanting me to stay. Her answer revealed the core of both their anxieties. Emma was afraid of abandonment, while Marcus was afraid of commitment. Both fears were rooted in their experiences of devastating loss, and both threatened to undermine the healing relationship they were building. What would make you worry that I might change my mind? Marcus asked, recognizing the importance of understanding her perspective. Emma hesitated, clearly weighing whether honesty might jeopardize her security. Sometimes, when you get quiet and sad, I wonder if having me here reminds you too much of Mrs. Rebecca and what you lost. And sometimes I wonder if taking care of me is too different from what you're used to doing as a doctor. Her perceptiveness was both impressive and heartbreaking. Emma had accurately identified Marcus's primary areas of resistance, his fear that caring for her somehow diminished his memory of Rebecca, and his uncertainty about transitioning from the professional role of physician to the personal role of guardian. Emma, Marcus said carefully, those are both legitimate concerns, and I appreciate you being honest about them. Can I share something with you about what I've been struggling with? Emma nodded eagerly, clearly recognizing this as an important conversation. Since Rebecca died, I've been afraid of caring too much about anything or anyone, Marcus admitted. I was afraid that if I opened my heart again, I might experience another loss I couldn't handle. But I've realized that trying to protect myself from caring was actually dishonoring Rebecca's memory. Emma listened intently, her young face serious with concentration. Rebecca believed that love and service to others were the most important things in life, Marcus continued. By withdrawing from those connections, I was rejecting everything she stood for. You haven't reminded me of what I lost, Emma. You've reminded me of what I still have the capacity to give. Emma's eyes brightened with understanding and relief. So taking care of me doesn't make you miss Mrs. Rebecca more? It makes me miss her differently, Marcus explained. Instead of missing her because I'm alone and purposeless, I miss her because I wish she could see what we're building together. I think she would be incredibly proud of both of us. The conversation marked a turning point in Marcus's internal resistance. Instead of viewing his commitment to Emma as a betrayal of his grief or an impossible burden, he began to see it as a natural extension of the love he had shared with Rebecca. Caring for Emma didn't diminish his wife's memory, it honored her values and gave concrete expression to their shared dreams. But practical challenges remained. Marcus quickly discovered that parenting required skills quite different from those he had developed as a physician. Medical training had taught him to maintain professional boundaries, to make decisions based on clinical evidence, and to approach problems with detached objectivity. Parenting Emma required emotional availability, intuitive responses to her needs, and the willingness to make mistakes and learn from them. The differences became apparent during Emma's first week of school enrollment. Marcus had researched educational options thoroughly, evaluating academic programs, security measures, and counseling services. He had prepared detailed medical and educational histories, coordinated with law enforcement about safety protocols, and even arranged for Emma to receive additional tutoring to help her catch up on missed schoolwork. What he hadn't prepared for was Emma's emotional response to being in a large group of children for the first time since her captivity. Despite all his careful planning, she became overwhelmed by the noise and activity of the middle school environment, triggering a panic attack that required him to leave his clinic in the middle of the day to comfort her. "I'm sorry," Emma sobbed in the school nurse's office where Marcus found her. "I thought I was ready, but there were so many people and loud noises, and I couldn't stop thinking about the van where Mr. Cross kept us." Marcus felt his physician instincts kick in, his mind automatically cataloging her symptoms and considering appropriate interventions. But then he caught himself, recognizing that Emma didn't need a doctor in that moment. She needed a parent. Someone who would hold her while she cried, who would reassure her that her feelings were valid, and who would help her feel safe enough to try again. "You don't need to apologize for having a normal response to trauma," Marcus said, sitting beside her on the nurse's office cot and offering the kind of physical comfort he would never have provided to a patient. "We'll figure this out together, and we'll take as much time as you need." The incident led to a series of conversations with school counselors about trauma-informed educational approaches, discussions with Emma about coping strategies for anxiety, and modifications to her school schedule that would ease her transition. Marcus learned to balance his natural inclination to solve problems quickly with Emma's need for patience and emotional support. Similar learning experiences occurred in other areas of their developing relationship. Marcus discovered that Emma's eating habits had been shaped by months of food scarcity, leading her to hoard snacks and eat rapidly, as if someone might take her meals away. His initial response was to address the behavior through education about nutrition and food security, but he quickly realized that she needed time and consistent reassurance before her relationship with food could normalize. "It's okay to eat slowly," Marcus would remind her during meals, modeling the relaxed enjoyment of food that Emma was relearning. "There's plenty of food, and no one is going to take it away from you." Each small breakthrough required Marcus to release some of his need for control and clinical precision, allowing Emma's healing to proceed at her own pace rather than according to any medical timeline. The process was teaching him as much about his own capacity for patience and unconditional love as it was about effective parenting. The most significant test of Marcus's commitment came when FBI agent Jennifer Martinez contacted them about Emma's potential testimony in the broader case against Cross's trafficking network. The prosecution was building a comprehensive case that could result in federal charges against multiple defendants, but Emma's testimony would be crucial for establishing patterns of criminal behavior. Emma would need to testify about her purchase, transportation, and planned sale, Agent Martinez explained during a meeting at the clinic. Her account provides direct evidence of interstate trafficking, which carries much more serious penalties than the charges we can currently prove. Marcus felt his protective instincts surge at the thought of Emma having to relive her trauma in a public courtroom. Is her testimony absolutely necessary? Surely you have other evidence against these people. We have evidence, but Emma's testimony would significantly strengthen the case, Agent Martinez admitted. However, Dr. Chen, the decision is ultimately up to Emma. We won't compel a minor trafficking victim to testify against her will. Emma had been listening to the conversation with growing tension, clearly understanding the weight of the decision she was being asked to make. If I don't testify, will Mr. Cross and his people get lighter sentences? Agent Martinez nodded reluctantly. It's possible. And other victims might not get justice if we can't prove the full scope of the trafficking operation. Marcus watched Emma wrestling with the decision, seeing her weigh her own comfort against her sense of obligation to other victims. It was an impossible choice for someone her age, and every protective instinct told him to refuse on her behalf. But then Emma spoke with the moral clarity that had characterized her since their first meeting. I'll do it. If my testimony can help other kids, then I have to do it, even if it's scary. Marcus felt a complex mixture of pride and fear at Emma's decision. She was demonstrating the same commitment to service that had driven Rebecca's choices, but she was also exposing herself to additional trauma and potential danger. His role. as her guardian required him to support her choice, while also protecting her from its consequences as much as possible. If Emma testifies, Marcus said to Agent Martinez, what kind of protection and support will be provided? I want detailed plans for her safety, her emotional preparation, and her recovery afterward. Agent Martinez outlined the extensive victim support services available to trafficking survivors who cooperated with prosecutions. Emma would receive specialized counseling, legal representation, witness protection if necessary, and ongoing monitoring of her safety and well-being. As they prepared for the challenges ahead, Marcus realized that his initial resistance to the complexities of caring for Emma had been replaced by fierce determination to ensure she had every possible advantage and protection. She had chosen courage over comfort, just as Rebecca had done. The least he could do was match her commitment with his own. The evening after their meeting with Agent Martinez, Marcus and Emma sat together on the clinic's front porch, watching the sunset paint the Colorado mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The peaceful scene belied the intensity of the decisions they had made and the challenges they would face. Are you scared about testifying? Marcus asked, giving Emma an opportunity to express any doubts or fears. Yes, Emma admitted. But I'm also excited about the possibility of helping other kids. My mama always said that being scared and being brave weren't opposites, they could exist at the same time. Marcus smiled at the wisdom of Emma's mother, recognizing another parallel to Rebecca's philosophy about courage. Your mother sounds like she would have gotten along well with Rebecca. They both understood that doing the right thing isn't always easy or comfortable. Emma leaned against Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of trust and affection that still surprised him with its power to heal the wounds in his own heart. Do you think we're doing what they would want us to do? Marcus considered the question seriously, thinking about both women's values and the choices that lay ahead. I think they would be proud of our commitment to protecting other children, and I think they would understand that love sometimes requires taking risks. As the stars appeared in the darkening sky above Pine Valley, Marcus felt the last of his resistance to their shared future dissolving. Emma had challenged him to become not just a guardian, but a true advocate for vulnerable children. Together, they would face whatever dangers and difficulties lay ahead, united by their commitment to honoring the memory of two remarkable women who had taught them that healing required both professional skill and personal courage. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the newly expanded Riverside Clinic, watching Emma help prepare the main treatment room for their first official community health fair. The transformation of both the facility and their lives had been remarkable, driven by Emma's testimony that had successfully dismantled Vincent Cross's entire trafficking network and secured federal funding for victim services programs. The clinic bore little resemblance to the quiet, isolated practice Marcus had maintained during his years of grief. Rebecca's original vision had finally come to life, enhanced by Emma's insights and the community support that had rallied around their mission. The main building now housed not only medical treatment rooms, but also counseling offices, legal aid services, and educational spaces designed specifically for trauma survivors. Emma moved through the preparations with the confidence of someone who had found her true calling. At 13, she had become an unofficial ambassador for trafficking survivors, speaking at conferences about her experiences and advocating for stronger protections for vulnerable children. Her testimony had not only convicted Cross and 11 of his associates, but had also led to policy changes in how law enforcement agencies coordinated responses to human trafficking cases. Marcus, where should we put the information table for the foster care program? Emma called from across the room, her arms full of brochures and educational materials. Marcus looked up from the medical supplies he was organizing, struck as always by the easy familiarity with which Emma used his name and moved through their shared space. The frightened, traumatized child who had collapsed outside his clinic had evolved into a poised young advocate whose presence filled their home with laughter, purpose, and hope. Next to the counseling services display, Marcus replied, pointing toward the corner where Dr. Sarah Chen, a trauma specialist they had recruited from Denver, was setting up information about therapeutic programs for abuse survivors. Emma, could you also check with Mrs. Rodriguez about the translation services? We want to make sure everyone feels welcome here today. Mrs. Carmen Rodriguez was one of several community volunteers who had joined their mission after learning about Emma's story through local media coverage. A retired teacher whose own family had immigrated from Mexico decades earlier, Carmen, provided translation services and cultural guidance that helped the clinic serve the region's growing Hispanic population more effectively. The community health fair represented a milestone that went far beyond providing free medical services. It was a public declaration that the Riverside Clinic had become exactly what Rebecca had envisioned, a place where anyone could find healing, regardless of their ability to pay, their immigration status, or their past experiences. Marcus watched Emma interact with the volunteers, noting how naturally she had assumed a leadership role in organizing events and coordinating services. Her experience as a trafficking survivor gave her unique credibility with other trauma victims, while her intelligence and compassion made her an effective advocate for policy changes that could protect vulnerable children. Dr. Chen called Detective Sarah Williams, who had arrived early to help with security for the health fair. I wanted to update you on the cross case before things get busy here. Marcus and Emma both turned their attention to Sarah, whose friendship had become one of the cornerstones of their extended family. The detective had not only played a crucial role in ensuring Cross's conviction, but had also served as an unofficial mentor to Emma, teaching her about the legal system and encouraging her advocacy work. Vincent Cross was sentenced yesterday, Sarah announced with satisfaction. 45 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. The judge specifically cited Emma's testimony as instrumental in understanding the scope of his criminal enterprise. Emma's face showed a complex mixture of relief and sadness at the news. Cross's conviction meant justice for his victims, but it also marked the end of a chapter in her life that had been both traumatic and transformative. What about the other children who were rescued? Emma asked, her concern for fellow survivors always taking precedence over her own feelings. All 11 children have been placed in safe, permanent homes, Sarah reported. 3 of them are in therapeutic foster care. 5 have been reunited with family members who were not involved in their trafficking, and 3, like you, have been adopted by families specifically trained to support trafficking survivors. Marcus felt a surge of pride at being included among the families who had successfully provided homes for rescued children. The adoption process had been completed just 2 months earlier, making Emma legally and permanently his daughter. The ceremony had been small but meaningful, attended by their extended chosen family of medical colleagues, law enforcement friends, and community supporters. Dr. Chen, Sarah continued, there's something else I wanted to discuss with you. The FBI has been so impressed with the victim services model you've developed here that they're considering funding similar programs in other regions. They'd like Emma to serve on an advisory committee for trafficking survivor services. Emma's eyes widened with interest at the possibility of expanding their impact beyond Pine Valley. Would that mean helping other doctors set up clinics like this one? Exactly, Sarah confirmed. Your perspective as a survivor who has successfully integrated into a supportive family and community is incredibly valuable. Most policymakers have never heard directly from someone who has lived through trafficking and recovered from it. Marcus felt a familiar mixture of pride and protectiveness as he considered the opportunity. Emma's advocacy work had already taken her to conferences and policy meetings throughout Colorado, but serving on a federal advisory committee would involve even greater responsibilities and public exposure. What do you think, Emma? Marcus asked, respecting her autonomy to make decisions about her own involvement in such work. It would be a significant commitment, and it would mean talking about your experiences with even more people. Emma considered the question seriously, weighing the personal costs against the potential benefits for other children. If it could help other kids get the kind of help I found here, then I want to do it. But I'd want you to be involved too, Marcus. This clinic and our family are what made my recovery possible. Marcus felt his heart swell with love for this remarkable young woman who consistently chose service over comfort, who had transformed her own trauma into a force for protecting others. Of course, I'll support you in whatever way I can. We're a team, Emma. We always will be. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the first families for the health fair. Marcus watched as Emma immediately shifted into her role as a volunteer coordinator, greeting visitors with genuine warmth and helping direct them to appropriate services. Her natural ability to put traumatized people at ease had made her an invaluable part of their clinical team. Throughout the morning, Marcus found himself observing the steady stream of patients and families who came seeking help. Undocumented. Immigrants who had been afraid to seek medical care elsewhere. Children showing signs of abuse or neglect. Elderly residents who couldn't afford prescription medications. And teenagers who needed confidential reproductive health services. Each person represented a success story for the clinic's mission to serve the most vulnerable members of their community. Dr. Sarah Chen approached Marcus during a brief lull in activity, her expression thoughtful as she watched Emma counsel. A young mother whose toddler was receiving his first comprehensive medical examination. Marcus, I've been working with trauma survivors for 15 years, and I've never seen a child integrate her experiences as successfully as Emma has, Sarah observed. Whatever you've created here, it's extraordinary. Marcus followed Sarah's gaze to where Emma was patiently explaining vaccination schedules to the nervous mother, her manner professional but compassionate. I think what we've created is exactly what Rebecca always envisioned. A place where healing addresses not just medical needs, but emotional and social needs as well. It's more than that, Sarah insisted. Emma isn't just a success story, she's become a healer herself. The way she connects with other trauma survivors, the insights she provides about effective interventions, the advocacy work she's doing to change policy. She's transformed her own suffering into a gift for others. Marcus nodded, recognizing the truth in Sarah's assessment. Emma had indeed become a healer, though her methods differed from traditional medical practice. Her willingness to share her story gave hope to other survivors. Her advocacy work influenced policy makers who had never encountered trafficking victims directly, and her presence at the clinic created an atmosphere of acceptance and understanding that enhanced everyone's ability to heal. As the afternoon progressed, Marcus was approached by Dr. Michael Torres, a colleague from his military days who had driven up from Denver specifically to see what they had built at the Riverside Clinic. Michael represented a group of veteran medical professionals who were considering establishing similar programs in other underserved communities. Marcus, this is incredible, Michael said, gesturing around the bustling clinic where medical care, counseling services, legal assistance, and educational programs were all being provided simultaneously. How did you manage to coordinate all these different services? Most clinics struggle just to provide basic medical care. Marcus smiled, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. It started with one person in desperate need, Michael. Emma taught me that effective healing requires addressing all the factors that create vulnerability, not just the immediate medical problems. Michael nodded thoughtfully. The girl who testified against that trafficking ring? I read about the case in the medical journals. Her advocacy work has been remarkable. Emma has been remarkable from the day she arrived here, Marcus agreed. But what's been most important is creating an environment where she could heal and discover her own strengths. That's what this clinic is really about, providing not just treatment, but the support people need to rebuild their lives. Their conversation was interrupted by Mrs. Rodriguez, who approached with obvious excitement about something she had witnessed during the morning's activities. Dr. Chen, you need to see what Emma is doing with the Hernandez family, Carmen said, her voice filled with admiration. Their 14-year-old daughter has been refusing to speak to anyone about the abuse she experienced, but Emma has gotten her to open up. They're in counseling room too, and the girl is actually smiling for the first time since they arrived. Marcus excused himself from his conversation with Michael and made his way to the counseling area, where he could observe Emma's interaction with the Hernandez family through the partially open door. The teenage girl, Maria, had been brought to the clinic by her grandmother after revealing that her stepfather had been sexually abusing her for over a year. Emma was sitting across from Maria, speaking in quiet, serious tones while the girl's grandmother held her hand supportively. Marcus couldn't hear the specific words, but he could see that Emma was sharing something personal, something that was helping Maria understand that she was not alone in her experience. The most important thing to remember, Marcus heard Emma say as he moved closer, is that what happened to you was not your fault, and it doesn't define who you are or what you can become. I know it feels like the pain will never stop, but I promise you that it changes. It becomes something you can carry without it crushing you. Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face, but her posture straighter than it had been when she arrived. How do you know? How can you be sure? Emma reached into her pocket and withdrew her mother's pendant. the silver medical cross that had been her talisman throughout her own journey to recovery. Because I was hurt too, Maria. Hurt by people who were supposed to protect me. And for a long time, I thought that pain was all I would ever know. But then I found people who cared about me, really cared, and they helped me discover that I was stronger than the people who hurt me. Marcus felt tears welling in his eyes as he watched Emma offer hope to another traumatized child, using her own experiences as a bridge to help someone else begin healing. This was exactly what Rebecca had envisioned when she planned programs for trafficking survivors, not just professional treatment, but peer support from people who had successfully navigated similar traumas. Dr. Chen, Maria's grandmother, called softly, noticing Marcus in the doorway. "Thank you for bringing this angel to help my granddaughter. Emma has given her something we couldn't provide, hope that she can heal from this." Marcus stepped into the room, his heart full as he watched Emma comfort Maria with the same gentle strength that had characterized her own recovery. Emma has a gift for helping other survivors understand that their experiences don't have to define their futures. Emma looked up at Marcus with a smile that reminded him of all the reasons he had fallen in love with this remarkable child. "Marcus taught me that healing isn't something you do alone. It happens when people choose to care for each other, even when it's difficult or scary." As the health fair concluded that evening, Marcus and Emma worked together to clean up the clinic and process the day's experiences. They had seen over 200 people, provided medical care to dozens of families, connected vulnerable individuals with social services, and given hope to trauma survivors who had believed they were beyond help. Today felt different from our other community events, Emma observed as she organized educational materials that would be distributed at future clinics. More like what Mrs. Rebecca originally planned, but also like something new. Marcus considered Emma's insight, recognizing the truth in her observation. The clinic had indeed evolved beyond even Rebecca's original vision, enhanced by Emma's perspective and the community relationships they had built together. "I think what's different is that we've learned to address not just people's immediate needs but their long-term potential," Marcus replied. "Rebecca wanted to provide health care to underserved populations. What we've created also helps people discover their own capacity to heal and serve others." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Like Maria today, she came here feeling broken and powerless, but by the time she left, she was talking about maybe helping other kids who have been abused. That's not just healing, that's transformation." Marcus felt a profound sense of completion as he listened to Emma articulate the philosophy that now guided their work. They had successfully created something that honored Rebecca's memory while also reflecting the wisdom Emma had gained through her own journey from victim to survivor to advocate. "Emma," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of everything they had accomplished together. "Do you remember the question you asked me that first night when you were so sick and scared? You asked if I could make the pain stop." Emma smiled, her eyes bright with understanding of how far they had both traveled since that desperate moment. "I remember. I was talking about the physical pain, but also the hurt inside that felt like it would never go away. I've been thinking about that question a lot lately," Marcus continued, "because I realized that I couldn't make your pain stop, Emma. But what I could do was help you transform it into something powerful and healing. The pain became the foundation for your ability to help other people." Emma moved closer to Marcus, taking his hand in the gesture of affection that had become natural between them. "You did something better than making the pain stop, Marcus. You helped me learn that pain could be useful, that it could teach me things about strength and compassion that I never would have learned otherwise." Marcus felt tears beginning to blur his vision as he absorbed the profound truth in Emma's words. She had indeed transformed her suffering into a gift for others, using her experiences to advocate for policy changes, support other survivors, and demonstrate the possibility of healing from even the most severe trauma. "But Marcus," Emma continued, her voice soft with emotion, "you also gave me something even more important than learning to use my pain. You gave me a family. You made me understand that I was worth protecting, worth loving, worth investing in. That's what really healed me." Marcus pulled Emma into a hug, overwhelmed by gratitude for the gift her presence had brought to his life. She had not only honored Rebecca's memory, but had also taught him that love was not diminished by loss, but rather expanded by the willingness to open one's heart again. "Emma," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion, You saved me as much as I saved you. You brought me back to life, back to purpose, back to the person Rebecca fell in love with. You are the best thing that ever happened to this clinic, to this community, and to me." As they stood together in the clinic that had become both their workplace and the symbol of their shared mission, Marcus reflected on the mysterious ways that healing sometimes worked. Emma had arrived as a broken child seeking medical care, but she had brought with her the key to unlocking his own recovery and the fulfillment of dreams he had thought were lost forever. The question, "Sir, can you make the pain stop?" had been answered not through the elimination of suffering, but through its transformation into purpose, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between a man who had lost everything and a child who had survived the unthinkable. Together, they had learned that healing was not about returning to who they had been before their trauma, but about becoming who they were meant to be through their commitment to each other and to serving others who needed the same hope they had found. 6 months later, as Marcus watched Emma address a congressional committee about the need for comprehensive services for trafficking survivors, he knew that Rebecca would have been overwhelmed with pride at what they had accomplished. The clinic served over 1,000 patients annually, had facilitated the rescue and rehabilitation of dozens of trafficking victims, and had become a model for trauma-informed care that was being replicated throughout the country. But more than any professional achievement, Marcus treasured the simple moments of their daily life together. Emma's laughter at breakfast, her excitement about school projects, her thoughtful questions about medical procedures, and her unwavering commitment to helping others who faced the same challenges she had overcome. She had not only healed from her own trauma, but had become a beacon of hope for countless others who needed to believe that recovery was possible. The pain had not stopped for either of them, but it had been transformed into something beautiful, powerful, and healing. Emma had taught Marcus that the question was not whether pain could be eliminated, but whether it could be used to create something meaningful for others who were suffering. In learning to care for her, Marcus had rediscovered his own capacity for love, service, and hope. Together, they had answered Emma's desperate childhood question in the most profound way possible. They had learned that true healing came not from the absence of pain, but from the presence of love, purpose, and the unshakable knowledge that they belonged to each other and to the community they served. The rancher had indeed done more than heal. He had made Emma his own, and in doing so, had found his own path back to wholeness. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.